Hey, we will start this one off. Or will we?
Smith is the most common last name in Canada, the UK, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Silva is the most common in Portugal, and a version of that, da Silva, in Brazil. Maps. They not only tell us where places are, they also often provide us with important data about those places. One map can tell us this is where Barcelona, New York, or Leiria is, and another might use one of those regional maps to transmit information about the region, like the population density of New York, the amount and distribution of Airbnbs in Barcelona, or the age distribution of Leiria residents. Essentially, maps can serve both as a way to locate a region or country, but also as a vehicle, a way of visually transmitting information regarding that region. Through those maps, we are able to better understand the world.
I was recommended this video after we saw the one on that NASA image that was mapping out global light pollution. And then actually after watching that video, I came across this map of Facebook connections around the world, which was similarly interesting because some of the dark spots on the map coincided in both. Actually, if he doesn't cover that Facebook map in this video, I will add it here.
Religious divisions in Germany. It's extraordinary how the division line matches almost perfectly with the division between the old East and West Germany that existed during the Cold War. East Germany is almost all of it non-religious in its majority, and while Protestantism and Catholicism mix all over, there are some stronger concentrations that we can point out. The North is clearly more Protestant and the South more Catholic. This likely has to do with the fact that Germany only became unified rather late in history, and different states ruled over these lands, with independence or at least autonomy. The West's proximity to Catholic France perhaps played a part in them remaining Roman Catholic, just like the South's proximity to Austria. When we look,
I could watch a whole video just on this. And it says that the black on the map represents no religion or other, so I wonder how much of that is actually other. But as far as the Protestant and Catholic mix, makes sense to me. Martin Luther has entered the chat.
Look at other statistical maps about Germany, it's really impressive how these divisions, most dating back to the Cold War, but a few even as further back as the Roman Empire or the Holy Roman Empire, are still noticeable. Not necessarily meaning they are a consequence from those times, in all cases, but that the cause is still the same as it was back then. Next, we have a map about the entire world, although separated in regions. These depict the most common last name in every country. They separate them into continents, but also into types of names, with each color representing a different type of origin. Red seems to be the most common in terms of number of countries from ancestral origin. I'm not sure what they mean by this though. Light blue from a personal characteristic is next. Occupation is third in orange, and then the others. Smith is the most common last name in Canada, the UK, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Silva is the most common in Portugal, and a version of that, da Silva, in Brazil. Italy also shares the common Rossi surname with Monaco. Müller is the most common in both Germany and Switzerland, and Czechia and Poland have different but similar ones, Novak and Novakova. I'm not sure if there's an actual connection there or if it's just a coincidence. In Korea, Kim is the most common, and in India, Devi. And it's interesting to see how some places have common last names that are still perhaps a consequence of European colonialism, like it is the case with Smith in all those old British colonies. Timor-Leste's is Soares, a Portuguese name, as it was a Portuguese domain, and Sri Lanka is Pereira, similar to the...
I see Muhammad a few times in Africa, and then also in Asia, in the Middle East. And then Hernandez is the most common last name in Mexico. I see that a couple of times as well in South and Central America, along with Lopez. Wow. And Nguyen being the most common last name in Vietnam makes sense. I've met so many Nguyen's. I actually have never met someone with the surname Smith, ever. Although I've obviously heard it in films and such. Papadopoulos is the most popular surname in Greece. Okay. I'm sure my surname is nowhere on this list. If yours is, let us know.
Portuguese Pereira. The Portuguese did use to rule Ceylon, but I'm unsure if there's a direct connection here. Now focusing on a specific continent. This map that shows us the average number of days with rain in Europe. This one isn't the best when it comes to graphical appeal because first of all, it's city by city and not country by country. This makes it impossible, or at least much more difficult, especially when only a few cities are depicted. That way we can't really use color to differentiate the regions. All we can do is look at the numbers in a similar way that we would a simple list, but it still sends across some interesting information. We can clearly see that as we go further north, more rain takes place. However, there are some interesting comparisons to make. Northern Spain has more rain than southern France, for instance. Andorra surpasses London's rainy days. Almeria has less than a month's worth of rain per year, and Barcelona, Lisbon, and Madrid are only about 2 months each. Warsaw is surprisingly low.
Almeria is in a desert. It looks like it doesn't rain very much in Marseille or Monaco or Catania. Only 43 days in Athens. Noted. The place I've been that rains the most is Mexico City. Or at least it feels that way to me. It could be a very clear day for maybe, I want to say late spring, May to August. During the day, everything's fine, but then in the evening, subtropical rain. I don't know how many days a year though. There isn't much South America content in this video so far, but I'll look up how many days and link it.
At 93 days, at least when compared to its neighboring country cities, and Glasgow in Scotland seems to be the rainiest place out of all of these. Back to a worldwide view, this map about the current status of military conscription around the world. And here it is interesting to see how different regions vary. In blue are countries with no enforced conscription, meaning there is no mandatory military service. Yellow means limited, although I'm not sure what that means and where those limits lie. Orange means it exists but is planned to be abolished, but again, not specifying if what currently exists is limited or full conscription. And in red are the countries in the world which force their population to go through a period of military training and or service. Now keep in mind these might differ a lot within each main category or color. For instance, Switzerland has mandatory conscription, but it may be civilian, and it's 390 days if you do it as a non-combatant, or 245 if you do armed conscription. But Austria, which is within the same category, does it differently. 9 months if it's civilian and 6 if it is armed. These, along with Finland and Greece, seem to be the only fully mandatory in Europe, a status which is rare across the world.
I have a friend from Finland, and I distinctly remember we were living in Spain at the time, and he had to return to his country for his obligatory military conscription. I don't know how long it lasts though, because it ended up that he liked it and stayed. Finns, maybe you can weigh in. But I wonder if limited means that they reserve the right to conscript, or maybe in wartime they have it, or I'm not sure if this is the correct term, draft lottery or lottery draft. Maybe that's not a thing anymore. If you know, please let us know.
With only a few countries in each continent having it, and a big concentration in the region of the Middle East. China is in the blue, but I looked it up and found that in some cases it is mandatory. The majority is thankfully in the blue, a sign of peace and freedom for their citizens. Speaking of fighting, this map shows us the battle between the Dutch and one of their greatest enemies, the sea,
the video is
depicting
a bit old.
Land reclamation by the Dutch throughout the centuries, starting surprisingly early and demonstrating how much land they have effectively conquered from the sea to expand their country's land. By 1300, the current territory of the Netherlands looked like this. Between 1500 and 1700, it had already increased significantly, and between 1700 and 1900, that increased even more. From 1900 to 2000, the difference is even larger, with 3 main masses of land being created. Here we can see exactly how much they gained, with the areas in green being the only original ones, making much more space for their people to live in. Speaking of where people live, this map divides the US into 50 states, the same number as there are now, but with a different criteria for these states' delimitations, creating 50 states with equal population. This doesn't make much sense in terms of practicality, in my opinion, and is somewhat pointless, but it is a useful way of seeing how population concentrates across the US. You can clearly see how populated the coasts are and how, as you get further in, especially in the western interior, land is very sparsely populated. I mean, look, this state of Orange around San Diego is super small, but would have the same population as any of these 3 mega states of Salt Lake, Ogallala, or Shiprock. I have no idea where the mapmaker got these names, by the way, although some match the main cities of these areas. And it's interesting to think about.
Orange seems to be a combination of Orange County and San Diego County, which is similarly dense with Philadelphia over on the East Coast and New York. Shiprock is huge, but I guess no one wants to live there.
Our territorial divisions, despite historically logic and justified, sometimes even with natural barriers, are somewhat arbitrary and could be done in entirely different ways, which could change the way we perceive our territory across the world. Let's take a look at an old historical map which depicts the Roman Empire's expeditions to deep Africa. We always have the idea that Roman rule in Africa was confined to the Mediterranean coasts, which is true. We can see this dark line which points out the limits of Roman provinces, but it's interesting that they reached so far down. I for one was somewhat unaware of this until seeing this map and looking it up. The fact that they were able to venture through the Saharan desert is remarkable, especially at a time and by people who were likely not used to those types of expeditions, although probably aided by locals in North Africa. This map points out 4 expeditions over the course of around 100 years, from 19 BC to 90 AD, reaching all the way to Lake Chad. Apparently, the primary motivation for the expeditions were to secure sources of gold and spices, a goal that sounds extremely familiar as it was that of European colonialism as well over 1,000 years later. If you find these expeditions interesting, let me know and I can make a full video about them. To wrap things up for this video, we have 3 maps about Europe that I think help us better understand the continent. First, this one regarding European life expectancy. Over on the top left, you have the information regarding which color represents what. It's interesting to see the clear divide that there is between Eastern and Central/Western Europe. It's also interesting to see how life expectancy often does not only have to do with quality of life or a country's wealth, although that obviously plays an important if not key role. According to this map, Spain, Italy, and Switzerland have the highest life expectancy, being in the darker green. France and Greece follow in Southern Europe. A lot of people say that the traditional Mediterranean diet is very healthy, so who knows, maybe that's one of the reasons for this.
That could help. Spain, Italy, and Switzerland. Maybe it also has to do with lifestyle and stress factors, or healthcare. That's all I've got.
The Netherlands, Ireland, and Iceland follow, as well as Norway and Sweden. Then comes the third tier, but still in the green, with Portugal, Belgium, the UK, Germany, Austria, Slovenia, and Finland, and with Denmark being 1 tier below. Greece is a clear exception in the Balkans, which are all in yellow or orange, as well as Turkey. In Eastern Europe, the yellow-orange trend continues, with some cases of red. Countries where the life expectancy does not, on average, surpass 72 years. A big difference from those in dark green, which reach 83, a difference of more than a decade of life expectancy within the same continent. But these people would have to find a different place to live in if this next map became reality, showing us the amount of land that Europe would lose if all the ice on Earth's poles would melt. Essentially, almost all of Europe would lose a significant part of its coastline, especially in the northern Atlantic and Baltic coast. France would be incredibly reduced, half of Belgium and the whole of the Netherlands would disappear, as well as almost all of northern Germany and the entire territory of Denmark. Key cities would be underwater, like Copenhagen, Stockholm, Helsinki, or Riga, and the land.
This map seems very improbable to me, but I guess it also depends on the timeline.
Connection between Karelia and Russia would almost disappear. The UK would lose a big chunk of its eastern land, and northern Italy would be reduced to half, with Venice, which is barely staying above surface as it is today, would completely sink into the ocean. It's a scary scenario which would in this case be at the most extreme situation, in which humans also did nothing to stop the water from coming into land, but it's not that impossible that we eventually have to deal with something close to this. All that hard work by the Dutch would also go to waste, as not only the land they reclaimed, but literally all their territory would be underwater. But their techniques in keeping or pushing the ocean away might be an example of how Europe could save its land from being submerged in a scenario like this. Maybe in this case, Europe could evolve into some Star Wars Bespin type cloud cities. Speaking of which, this map depicts the European flight control zones. It's interesting to see how certain areas are divided and what the criteria might be behind those divisions. For instance, Portugal has a continental area in which it includes its autonomous Madeira archipelago. However, the other autonomous archipelago, the Azores, in the middle of the Atlantic, has its own control area. Spain divides itself in two, with their east coast and Balearic Islands separated. France has 5, the UK has one for England and Wales, and another for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Germany also divides itself in 3, as does Italy, and most of the other European countries have a single zone for the entire country. In some cases, separation might have to do with geographical distance, like with Portugal's case in the Azores, but in others, it might have to do with the amount of flights that come in, justifying a separation and certain areas having their own zone. And finally, the distribution of reindeers across the world, allowing us to understand why indeed Santa Claus is from the North Pole, as it is only in this area close to the Arctic that these types of animals are found. Although I have to say I was a little surprised with the extent of the territory they inhabit. I wouldn't expect them to be on islands, for instance, like these Canadian ones, or this one from Norway. I also didn't expect them to go so far down in Norway or reach the far east in Russia, almost making it into northern Japan. I was also unaware that they existed in Greenland or in Newfoundland. So those are some of the maps that I think help us better understand the world, from the information they transmit and the context which they provide for those regions or countries. Not only do the maps show us where a place is and how its geographical image is, they also provide us information about them in a certain aspect. Learning that information allows us to understand either the history of the country or region by understanding what caused it, to understand the current situation by seeing how it is now, or to be able to more accurately predict how things might be in the future. There's a virtually infinite amount of maps like this that I could use in videos, because thankfully there are a lot of statistics better depicted on maps. So if this video has a good response, I can do more videos like this with additional maps that teach us important and or interesting information about the world. Thanks so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you want. If you have any suggestions of data maps that I could use for a part 2 or more of this topic, let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.
That was probably the most fun map video I've seen on the channel. So yeah, he said the channel's called General Knowledge, which I will make sure to link down below. I'm not sure if I've seen anything else from them, although I recognize the little Napoleon Bonaparte caricature that he has in the thumbnail. This video is a bit longer. I've been recording now for 37 minutes, so I will pick out some of the more interesting maps, but I'll make sure to link the original video down below in case you want to watch without my commentary as well. If you know of any other videos like this that get into obscure maps, please tell me and we can cover it in the future. And if you have anything to add, do it. I'll take all the fun facts. I'll probably watch this video one more time because I really was interested by that surname portion. And by the end of this, he had me wondering if he's from Leiria. It's not very often that central Portugal is mentioned. And his slight Portuguese accent also kind of tipped me off there. So leave your thoughts on this one. The video mostly covered Europe and the US, so I'll pick a book from each continent, similar genres, somewhat similar themes, but they come to very different conclusions. The first is The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. And on the surface of this one, you're following a relationship between Tomás and Teresa, which is somewhat unconventional. Tomás has a hard time with monogamy, but it also intersects with the history of Czechoslovakia, the Soviet invasion, which affects each character differently. And through Tomás, you meet 2 other main characters. It's written such that each character's life is so detailed. Sometimes you're reading a chapter and it seems as though you're reading a story within a story. There is also a film adaptation. In the film, some storylines were left out, some characters weren't included at all, so I think it's fine on its own if you haven't read the book. Similar to how Teresa and Tomás's story is just the surface of Unbearable Lightness of Being, there is The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham. And in this story, you follow Larry Darrell, who's coming back from World War I, likely with PTSD, searching meaning in his life, and he's in a relationship with Isabel. The rest of the plot goes from there. This book, what makes it special is it follows multiple characters 3 continents, 4 countries, decades worth of time. Although it sounds like those 2 plots are somewhat similar, they couldn't come to more different conclusions. If you've read either book, let me know what you think. Or if you've read both and you think they compare or don't, please leave your opinion. But I'll make sure to link both in the description for you. All right, I'm going to try to pick at least one song from a country I haven't mentioned before. And that is Stop Seisku Aig by an Estonian singer called Veli Junas. I have no idea how I found this song, but I really like it. It sounds like soul folk rock from the 80s, I believe. Stop Seisku Aig means stop, time stands still. I don't speak Estonian, I just put it in a translator. But the lyrics are pretty good if you end up translating them. It's not often I hear any type of music from Estonia, so if you have any other recommendations of that, please let me know. And the second music choice is a mashup that someone on the internet made of Skepta and Erykah Badu. The song is called Nasty. Skepta is a hip-hop musician from the UK. Erykah Badu makes soul music from the United States. Together they are... The song sounds like 90s hip-hop. If you end up listening to either of those, please let me know your thoughts. And I'm always taking music recommendations, so thank you in advance. Thank you for watching with me, and I'll catch you in the next video.